my name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today we are doing a follow-up on the Marilyn Manson story. A lot of you really wanted to see like a part 2 to that video because even though it was literally like over an hour long, there was so much that I didn't have time to get to, and so I want to address some like common questions from that video, common things that I didn't bring up that people wanted to see, and of course, because this is an ongoing investigation still, and this is a developing story, new things are coming out. There have been some news items that have happened since I made that original video, which I want to address here, and hopefully this will help give you overall a more complete look at the story of Marilyn Manson if you still had any doubts or if there were things that you wanted to learn about that I didn't touch on in the previous video. So first things first, I do want to discuss the new news, the new business that has happened since the last time that I made this video. Now, when I talked at the end of that video, I did mention how a senator had called for an FBI investigation. I didn't mention it, but I do believe I showed on screen that the LA Sheriff's Department is investigating Marilyn Manson. He had also been dropped from Hot Topic for his merch. He had been dropped by his record label. And since then, he has also been dropped by his longtime manager, as well as leaving 2 of the television projects that he was working on. So there certainly have been a lot of ramifications for Marilyn Manson because of this. However, of course, the big question is there any actual legal action happening? And at least it seems that the FBI may be taking this a little bit more seriously because recently another victim of Marilyn Manson has come forward that we didn't previously know about, named Bianca Allaine. I'm not sure if that's how it's pronounced, but I'm gonna say Allaine, and then if I'm wrong, I'll like correct it on screen or in a pinned comment or something. I'm going to be calling her Bianca, but she actually has come forward saying that in 1995, when she was 16, she was forcibly kissed by Marilyn Manson, and then a few years later, in 1999, she was in a 3-month-long relationship with him, which she described as terrifying when she was only 19 years old. She has said that she is going to the FBI located in Maryland, and along with that, she is sharing video testimony that she recorded at the time in 1999 or around there when she was talking to her friends about the relationship. So this seems like it could be a pretty serious allegation. Now let's go ahead and talk about the details of this, because doing the research for this portion of what we're discussing, there are actually a number of details that we already know about this story. Like many of the other younger victims of Marilyn Manson, Bianca did originally know him as a fan of his work. She actually went to go see him at a concert during his 1995 tour for his Smells Like Children album, and she waited to meet him with some friends at his tour bus once the show was done. Reportedly, when her and her friends went to go see Manson, immediately he began with inappropriate contact, including forcing a kiss on her, which he did not want to have happen, as well as allegedly whispering in a friend's ear that he wanted to bite her. And when they did start to feel uncomfortable, they did leave the situation as quickly as possible. But of course, because Bianca was very young at the time and didn't have really much, if any, experience with boyfriends, dating, kissing, etc., she didn't really know what to think about the situation. Was this okay because this was like a really famous person that she looked up to? Was this unusual? She didn't really know what to think, and so she continued to be a fan of his work until 1999, when she then spent 3 months with him while he was on another tour. He was never violent towards me, but I believe the women who have come forward, and I feel I've dodged a bullet in a lot of ways. This certainly seems to fit his pattern, as it doesn't appear that he became physically violent in his relationships directly until later on in the timeline. He did hit his assistant at the time. He would beat him up. He would give him $100 every time if he'd gotten too high. We were often never alone on the tour bus, and his fetish back then was to watch people have sex with me or do things to me. A lot of the times I didn't want to have sex with these guys, but he was like, "Please, please, I really need it. I need to see it." He would masturbate, and if he didn't finish, he would want to have sex with me afterwards. and he would bite me so hard. Now, like I mentioned, it doesn't seem to be part of his pattern to have been directly physically violent at this early stage, like before really his relationship with Evan Rachel Wood, but this does seem to fit a lot of the patterns that we did see elsewhere. Like, I don't think I directly mentioned this in the original video, but like, biting comes up a lot for Manson. He likes biting, he likes talking about biting, and really, really deep biting during sex is a thing that we have at least a lot of evidence towards Marilyn Manson doing. And controlling sex and things around sex do seem to be part of his pattern as well, whether that be forcing groupies to have sex with his bandmates while he watches, having his girlfriends have sex with other men, or forcing his girlfriends to listen while he has sex with other women. It just voyeurism, exhibitionism, that does seem to be part of a pattern that he has, though it does seem to take on various forms in different stories that each of these women have. Unfortunately, these weren't the worst things that Bianca allegedly experienced while with him. It seems that he also carried over his pattern of belittling women's appearances and also making fun of them because of their heritage or ethnic background. Quote, "He would be very sweet to me one minute, and then he would degrade me in front of his friends. When he was with his entourage or group of guys, he would say things to me that I was fat, even though I was 5'10" and only 120 pounds at the time. The worst was when he once told me I looked like a dirty Mexican whore because I have olive skin." Now, if this just isn't an encapsulation of everything that we've heard from so many of the other stories, the control over appearance, the degrading of women because of their weight, degrading women because of the way that they look or their ethnic heritage. Like, again, if we're looking for patterns, it certainly seems that this, at least allegedly, started very early on in his relationships. Now, they were only together for 3 months, and the relationship ended when Marilyn Manson, as well as the rest of his entire team, suddenly goes to her one day without any sort of explanation. This caused Bianca to spiral into a pattern of self-hatred as well as into an eating disorder. Of course, now Bianca is fine. She is speaking to the press as well as to the FBI about this, and she is now 41 years old. She has this to say about her experience and the allegations that she's bringing forward about Manson. She doesn't believe in cancel culture, but she'd like to see an apology from Manson to his alleged victims and a police investigation as he faces more serious allegations. "I don't want to sit here and ruin somebody's life, but I'm angry with him, and if his abuse went that far, putting guns to people's heads and tying girls up, not letting them sleep, you shouldn't treat people like that," she said. "I admired him. I felt like I was in love with him. I'm still so confused about all of this. I just don't want him to keep hurting people." Now, other than this story from Bianca, we don't really have any like new news items really that are worth mentioning. I did talk about how he was dropped by his longtime manager, those things. The one update that I do want to mention that did happen between when I was filming and then editing the previous video was that Dita Von Teese deleted her statement that she had made on Instagram about the situation. I did slightly misremember it when I was talking about it on camera. I did show the full thing on screen, but the one part from it that did stick out to me that she did definitely say was she used the phrase incurred abuse, as in caused abuse to happen because of that person's own behavior or actions, which if she really genuinely meant it in that way, like, that's a little icky. I don't like that. That's victim blaming. Yay. I hope that it was just a typo, and maybe that's part of the reason why she deleted it. Obviously, she hasn't really talked about it since then, at least that I'm aware of, or at least when I'm filming this right now. So any other updates in terms of that, we will mention them in the future if they do come up. But I think what we really need to do is talk about the infinite number of things that I couldn't cover in the last video because there's so much. I know the main thing that I really saw people bring up that they wanted to know about was his previous relationship with Rose McGowan and her statements about the allegations, as well as his relationship with his current partner, now wife, Lindsay Usich. Again, names, I don't know how to pronounce them. I'm just trying my best out here, but she's also now married, so now her name's Lindsay Warner, so that's easier to remember than Ush is. But suffice to say, we do have a little bit more of the Marilyn Manson relationship timeline to go through, So let's go ahead and do that. We're first going to start with his previous relationship when he was with Rose McGowan. Rose McGowan and Marilyn Manson began dating in 1997 when she was around 24 and he was around 28. According to an interview in 1998 when he was promoting his new album, Mechanical Animals, he said that they met at a movie premiere for a film called Gummo and they started dating shortly thereafter. Also in the interview, he was asked how Rose McGowan felt about groupies and the whole rocker lifestyle, to which Manson responded with the following: "Well, if you're going to dedicate your attention to one person, then things change. I don't continue certain aspects of my life now that she's involved." And this is really interesting for a couple of reasons. One, if we can take rocker lifestyle to be referring to drug use, we know that Marilyn Manson had a coke habit. He had one before this. He definitely had a coke habit after this, so it doesn't seem that he stuck to his word of, tampering down the drug use, if that's the implication. And not only that, we also know that Rose McGowan liked a little bit of the blow herself because, as it turns out, very recently, as in 2017, not 1997, she had a felony possession charge because a cleaning crew found residue of cocaine in a wallet that she had on a flight to Dulles Airport just a couple of years ago, and she pled no contest to that charge. Now, the second most obvious pick, of course, would be the use of the term groupies, and this is where we really start to tie together the story of Rose McGowan and Bianca Allaine. And if Bianca's allegations are true, that would mean that they were in a 3-month-long sexual relationship in 1999, in the middle of when he was dating Rose McGowan. In fact, he got engaged to Rose McGowan in 1999. This is so interesting to me. So I'm going to put on my tinfoil hat for a second. Just allow me to pontificate for a moment. I have a little bit of a pet theory that I think kind of puts all these things together. So, for whatever reason, we know that Bianca was just ghosted by Marilyn Manson. We know that this was the year that they got engaged. What if Rose McGowan found out about his relationship with Bianca, which is the reason why Marilyn Manson suddenly ghosted her, was because maybe Rose was like, oh my gosh, you have to end this entirely, just cut her off, I need you to be just with me, and that just caused him to just suddenly end the relationship. That would explain the ghosting. Maybe them getting engaged was a way of like reassuring and shoring up the relationship. I think people have this very rose-colored view about engagements and getting married. Sometimes engagements and getting married are like, we need to fix this relationship and we're either going to get married or have a baby. So like maybe the engagement was kind of a way of saying like, hey, I am really dedicated to you. I want you. We're going to leave the cheating in the past. And then they proceeded to be engaged for 2 years and never actually tied the knot. So, spoiler alert for the end of the story with Rose McGowan, they don't end up getting married at the end of this. And maybe it could also be that when he sort of firmed up his relationship with Rose and they got engaged, he didn't really like need a side piece like Bianca anymore, and so he just like completely coldly like just cut her out, like cold turkey, bye, don't need ya, you're getting ghosted. Now these are all my wild theories. I just thought I would want to share them because I would find it really hard to believe that something like wasn't going on there that people like didn't kind of figure out, or at least like kind of know about, maybe kind of keep hush hush about. Like Manson's not necessarily the most discreet person, so I don't know. That's just my theory. I thought you guys would like enjoy hearing about it because most of the story is really intense, and sometimes we just need a little bit of like lighthearted, throwing stuff at the wall, seeing if we have any sort of theories that kind of tie things together just to sort of lighten the mood a little bit. So, like I said, he does not end up getting married to Rose McGowan. The relationship continues for a couple of years, and then they finally break off the engagement. Like with Dita Von Teese, very tight-lipped entirely about the reason why their engagement ended, why their relationship ended, and like Dita Von Teese, they also cited irreconcilable relationship and lifestyle differences. And they were both really, really quiet about it for a long time. If you even asked Marilyn Manson in an interview after this about Rose McGowan, he would walk away from the interview. Just interview over, bye, done. So we really didn't hear much about the nature of the end of the relationship. It wasn't until an interview in 2015 where we got a little bit of an insight into the end of their relationship. She said to the interviewer, "Think about it, Andy. What was Scarface about?" "Coke," he replied. "He did too much blow and you were now down for it." And that was basically all that was said. Now, she did respond and like hint that it was like actually her who maybe had the coke problem and that's why the relationship ended, which would be really interesting. But suffice to say, at least as far as we know, there wasn't any allegations, any instances of violence, of anything physical happening between them. It was just the relationship ended, there maybe was cheating involved, but that was really the long and the short of it. Now, the reason why people really wanted to know about Rose in this story and her opinion is because Rose in current day is really, really well known for kind of being the head in a lot of ways of the Me Too movement. She was at the forefront of making allegations against Harvey Weinstein. She has also previously spoken out against Adam Sandler for sexism because she was apparently offered a role in a movie that he also starred in where the casting notes directed her to wear a push-up bra and very form-fitting leggings to be able to read parts for the film to see if she was going to be a good fit for it. Now, the reason why she kind of called out Adam Sandler for this is Adam Sandler like stars, directs, writes a ton of his own movies, so it's quite likely that he was very involved directly in this casting note, wanting to like, you know, have her boobs pushed up as far as possible just to, you know, read lines to see if she was going to be a good fit for a film. So she has been very, very outspoken in numerous areas around Hollywood in regards to allegations, sexism, even more extreme things like sexual assault. And so of course people are like, okay, well, if Rose had a good relationship with him, then like what does this mean about all of these other women? Does this mean that these other allegations for some reason wouldn't be valid because Rose didn't have that experience with him? And in fact, it seemed to be from the comments that people implied that like Rose was supportive of Manson. I'm here to tell you that's not the case if you actually missed her public statement, because she did actually record a video, she put it on Twitter, and she had this to say. She said that her relationship with Marilyn Manson wasn't like that, but that fact should have, quote, no bearing on whether he was like that with others before or after, adding that she was profoundly sad today and disgusted, and that I stand with Evan Rachel Wood and the other brave women that have come forward. So, if you were under the impression that Rose McGowan was excusing Marilyn Manson's behavior, or hadn't made a statement about it, and was like, you know, okay with it, didn't have anything to say, she absolutely did. And I think we have to remember, with so many of these allegations, just because somebody's abusive doesn't mean that they abuse everyone in their entire life at all times, right? It may be that Marilyn Manson developed his abusive tendencies later on in his relationships. It could be something where maybe sort of the lack of like gap of power between people like him and Rose McGowan and Dita Von Teese kind of insulated them from the worst of it compared to some of the other women in his life. But we know that Marilyn Manson has been shitty to other bandmates and fans and managers and like tons of people in his life, right? One of the first stories that I ever brought up about him was the fact that he smashed a perfume bottle into his mother's face and left a scar. So he at least has some kind of violent tendencies towards a wide variety of people, but just because somebody is an abuser doesn't mean that they abuse everyone. And in fact, the very worst abusers, the really like true, like malignant, manipulative people, they will know, they will have a sense if this is somebody that they can get away with abusing, and they will pick and choose the people in their life that they will abuse, they will be shitty to, because they want to have bulldogs, right? They want to have people who are going to come to their defense and say like, oh, this is like a good person, he never treated me this way, so these things can't be true about these other women because that's not the person I know, that's not the man I know. Treating some people nice and some people like shit doesn't mean that you didn't treat those other people like shit. It's not a get out of jail free card, and you have to be really, really careful, because I think people just have this idea that like an abuser is just like abusive to everyone, and usually that's not the case, and it can be something that develops over time in relationships that wasn't present previously. So definitely keep that in mind. And now that we have Rose's story established, let's go ahead and talk about the big piece in the Marilyn Manson timeline puzzle, which is Lindsay Usich, also his current wife, Lindsay Warner. And when I talked in the last video, I mentioned that there was like this gap in like 2015 where he didn't really seem to have other partners, and this was like totally my bad for not mentioning this. This was one of the time periods when he was with Lindsay, and I say one of the time periods because they have had a very kind of like sporadic, hard to track relationship until like the last couple of years or so. And that's kind of why I didn't really focus on Lindsay in the previous video, because she has not made any statements at all about any of this. She has not shared any of her story whatsoever, so I don't really have any direct information from her to go off of, but I do think that her story is important to share, because when you do look into it, you get like everything all across the board. Like, people think that like Lindsay's the real abuser, she's actually manipulating Manson. Other people think that she's a victim of Manson as well that isn't able to come forward yet. And I just kind of want to see where, if we can determine it, where is the truth to this? Is Lindsay just as abusive as Manson has been to some of his other partners? Or is it that maybe Lindsay is currently trapped in her own abuse cycle with Manson? Let's discuss and find out. So the first thing that I want to address is the implication that Lindsay is just as abusive as Marilyn Manson is. And people will say, at least, especially if you go on like fan forums for him where they talk about his relationships a lot, they're like, oh, she's a gold digger, she's trying to keep him drugged up to steal his money, blah, blah, blah. I can't find any evidence for any of this. The main evidence that seems to exist is that fans don't like that Marilyn Manson has a girlfriend, because then they think that's less likely that he's gonna be in a relationship with them. It's also reported that she is mean to fans, that she can be really jealous of Manson. We do have one story that Manson has shared in an interview where apparently she checks his underwear with the black light after he comes home, so that way she can tell if he's not been loyal to her or not. And she can be certain about that because he reportedly doesn't change his underwear. And he just laughs and is like, yep, you're right, honey. And it's like, that's gross. And I didn't need to know that information. Other than this one underwear story, there's not really any sort of evidence that lends any sort of credence to her being abusive, her just being after his money, anything like that. Now, it could be possible, right? Abuse is complicated. Relationships are complicated. It could totally be the case something is happening that we don't have evidence for, that we don't really know about directly in the public. But if I don't have evidence or even stories from anybody really that even illustrate anything about any of these points, I can't really talk too much about them. So, fairly confident that Lindsay is not secretly the abuser in this dynamic. However, just because Lindsay is probably not abusive towards Marilyn Manson doesn't mean that her hands are clean in this situation. Because in one of the weirdest turns of this whole story, apparently after Evan Rachel Wood came out with allegations against Marilyn Manson, Lindsay decided to retaliate against her. She was working with somebody named Leslie Lee in a Discord chat to try and find photos and things that would discredit and make Evan Rachel Wood look bad. And then she wants more photos like this to shut her up, which is just, if this is true, if this really happened, like, oh my gosh, because the photos that they were conspiring to release were the Nazi photos from the last video that you might remember. You know, the ones where Evan Rachel Wood is underaged and drugged up and drunk, and the photos were specifically taken to be blackmail because they put a Hitler mustache on her? Yeah, those were the photos that they wanted to share. Evan Rachel Wood found out about it. She proactively released the photos, explained their context, explained what was going on to take away their blackmail power, and then she filed a police report against Lindsay in order to hopefully maybe at least make people aware that this is what happened. And I actually don't really know what the purpose of filing a police report for this is, because I don't know how this is breaking the law exactly, but it was something that she went to the police about. It is something that they are aware of, and I can't wrap my head around it. It's almost as though Lindsay is like being Marilyn Manson's bulldog, right? Like I mentioned, like abusers don't always abuse everyone, and even if you are abused, oftentimes they will kind of train you, right, to be defensive of them, because you have to believe to some extent that your abuser is a good person sometimes in order to just survive the situation. And we also know from Evan Rachel Wood's own story that for a while she hated Dito Von Teese. Like, she thought Dito Von Teese was this bad person who mistreated Marilyn Manson and didn't love him the way that, you know, Brian Warner deserved to be loved, right? Didn't understand him enough. And so it's almost as though maybe Lindsay has kind of gone in that same direction, only this time it's towards Evan and Rachel instead of Evan and Rachel being that, you know, towards Dito Von Teese, which is really, really interesting. Again, just theories, don't know for sure, but that is an observation which I think maybe could explain this situation. And I realize I've talked a lot about, you know, Lindsay's involvement and some theories about her relationship with Marilyn Manson, but let's go ahead and talk about the actual timeline and evidence that we have for the nature of her relationship with Marilyn Manson. Because like I said, their relationship, I think, could best be described as like on again, off again. They were first spotted together in 2010, shortly after his breakup with Evan Rachel Wood. However, even though they were spotted together in public again after that, they weren't actually boyfriend and girlfriend in name in Hollywood until a 2012 article with Revolver, where it is the first time that Lindsay is referred to as Marilyn Manson's girlfriend. And then they were allegedly separated in 2015, early on in the year, according to an article by Beat in Australia. However, they were then together again within a couple of months in 2015, according to a different article. And then, in 2020, in one of the other weirdest moments of this whole story, it was revealed in an interview that Marilyn Manson did with, of all people, Nicolas Cage, yeah, that Nicolas Cage, national treasure Nicolas Cage, that they had secretly been married during the pandemic and that Nicolas Cage had witnessed it from FaceTime and that he sung Love Me Tender. And I just, guys, can you guys see why this is just bananas? This is why I didn't talk about it in this first video, because secret Nicolas Cage pandemic weddings and all the breakups and the are they together, are they not, like, it's just a lot. This part by itself would be a solid 25 minutes. I have no idea what it's going to be when I edit this. It's probably going to be longer now that I've said that. But the reason why is because this whole timeline of their on again, off again relationship, getting married in a secret Nicolas Cage pandemic wedding, like, all of this is interspersed with, like, the time period of so many of his other allegedly abusive relationships, right? You have Esme Bianco, you have Ashley Lindsay Morgan, you have Sarah McNeely, Gabriella Ocarino, Chloe Black, Scarlett Capella, who knows who else, right? All of those relationships happened in and around this, like, 2010 to 2020 timeline when he was on again, off again, dating Lindsay. So I think that's pretty interesting. Now, of course, the next question to ask, especially when there were so many of these other allegedly abusive relationships happening on this whole timeline when he was also with Lindsay, do we have some indication that his relationship with Lindsay could have been abusive? Now, before I get into this, I do just want to re-emphasize that we do not have direct evidence really from Lindsay herself. She has not made statements about this. She has not claimed that she has been abused. She has never really talked about any of this publicly, made any sort of response. And so the evidence that I have to indicate if this is true or not is really coming from secondary sources, people who were around at the time. We do have some evidence from her directly, but it's definitely not the bulk of it. So a lot of this is definitely in the circumstantial category. Please remember this while I'm talking about it, but I do think it is important to talk about because it is part of Marilyn Manson's relationship history. So, trigger warning going ahead, we are going to be showing some graphic images. There are going to be photos. But this is really important to show and talk about because that is the evidence that we do have. Actually, one of the most infamous instances that we can point to as evidence of the nature of the relationship was a concert that Marilyn Manson did in 2015, I think around the time when they were broken up. And he's on stage and he has a printed piece of paper and he reads from it. And I'm just going to show you guys the clip so you can see his words in full. And Where did he get these words from? Well, allegedly, those are actually directly from a text message he got from Lindsay during the time of their break in 2015. Making me believe you love me and would protect me and never leave me? Liar. These are the last words you'll ever read because you couldn't even look me in the eye, you were so drunk. I hope your show epically fails. I hope you trick every dumb girl into thinking that they got the golden ticket. You are fool's gold, aka pyrite, and I am so happy that the 6 years meant nothing. Whew, yikes. Well, I mean, now we know that they ended up getting back together, and they're married now, obviously, but at least it sounds like a pretty terrible breakup. But is that really an indication that their relationship was abusive? Not really on its own, but we do have other evidence to point to, as both Lindsay and Manson are pretty prolific photographers. They love taking photos. Lindsay's job is actually, she is a professional photographer. Manson has taken lots and lots of photos of Lindsay over the years, and this is where we really start to see a lot of the indications of maybe where the relationship is at. We have photos that indicate maybe some like consensual BDSM is happening, right? You have things where like she has some like light bruising on her butt, for example. However, that is not the only evidence that we have, right? The other photos show things like a black eye, show things like maybe the indents from like somebody like really digging in with their fingers into somebody's forearm. Those could be explained by some more like edge play type consensual BDSM. They might not, though. We don't know. I certainly know people who can get black eyes, for example, like doing certain types of rope bondage, doing choking, for example. It doesn't always have to be caused by like a punch in the face, which is what a lot of people assume leads to a black eye. It could be explained by consensual BDSM, and we don't really know the nature of these marks. And do you guys remember the naughty room, right? You know, the small glass enclosure that he likes locking his girlfriends into? Well, it turns out during at least one of the references he made to journalists about the bad girls room, it was when he was with Lindsay. And it could be the case that he was referencing it. Maybe it was when he was using it with one of his like side pieces, with somebody he was cheating on Lindsay with. You know, it could be that. But maybe Lindsay has also experienced the bad girls room for herself, because in the article where we see this, he says the following. I don't like staying in bed too late, so I'm usually up by about 3 in the afternoon. If I lock my girlfriend in the naughty room the night before, I have to remember to let her out before she gets mad at me. So, he specifically says the word girlfriend and not just like a girl, like a groupie or something. So, you know, Lindsay's really the only person during this time that's like very publicly well known as his girlfriend. So it is quite likely he may be referring to Lindsay here. But again, we don't know. She hasn't said anything directly, but it is a possibility to point to. And we know that using the bad girls room is one of his MOs for his abusive relationships. And it also seems that she may be subject to one of his more obvious tactics, which is slowly changing her appearance. Now, this isn't as extreme as, for example, Evan Rachel Wood's transformation, but we do see over the timeline that she is with Manson, she adds a little bit of a beauty mark like the one that Dita Von Teese has. Her hair changes a little bit. We also see that her makeup style changes to be a little bit more like Dita's, and at least on one occasion, she was seen to maybe be copying one of Dita Von Teese's red carpet looks. Now again, this is not conclusive evidence. It does seem though that her appearance has slightly changed over the course of time that she's been with Manson. That could be innocent. It could be another indication of the pattern that we know he's had with so many of the other women in his life. We don't know for sure. But of course, we don't have just photographs and raw speculation to go off of. We do also have corroborating statements from people that were in Manson and Lindsay's life at the time when this was going on. We have a statement from Dan Cleary, who you may remember was Marilyn Manson's former assistant, who also spoke out about Evan Rachel Wood, had this to say about Lindsay on a podcast. I saw some physical abuse, as far as like pushing and throwing things at her, and a lot of violent outbursts around her, breaking things. A lot of mental abuse and name-calling and threats. There were times when Manson would tell her he's going to kill her and cut her up, and that I'm going to bury her in the desert. Me. He would leave her in the room, and I would tell her, you're going to be fine. I'm not going to do any of that to you. Let's get you to a hotel. Though he didn't name Lindsay directly when he made this statement, he did reference the fact that this was happening between 2014 and 2015, and that the person he was talking to was Marilyn Manson's now wife, which really only leaves Lindsay as the sole answer. Now, Dan Cleary wasn't the only person to witness Manson's behavior towards Lindsay. Otep Shamaya of the band that shares the same name had this to say about the nature of the relationship. Lindsay used to call our house in the early hours, and I was told she was hysterical because he was on another drug binge, threatening her life, throwing knives at her that stuck into the wall, and verbally assaulting her. We offered many times to have her come to mine because he would never come face me with that bullshit, believe it. But sadly, she wouldn't leave him. So my ex would be calm and talk her down until Manson realized she was on the phone and he'd woe down. But then he started calling in the early hours. I was told he was paranoid, gacked out of his mind, and accused his wife of cheating with an imaginary person who had blonde hair and a blonde mustache named Dawn, who he, I'm told, saw on his security cameras and was, quote, fucking his wife. Look, this is heartbreaking for all the women he's hurt, but also for all the fans who always had his back, like me. Because Otep was also a really big fan of Marilyn Manson, even going back to the Columbine era. So, what can we say about Lindsay's relationship with Marilyn Manson then? Again, of course, we don't really know for sure, but we can speculate. And it certainly seems, based on the evidence that we do have and the statements from people that are in their lives, that it could be the case that she is currently locked in her own abuse cycle with Marilyn Manson. It is horrible that she was threatening to release blackmail, if that was true, against Evan Rachel Wood. And that is one of the unfortunate things, again, that can happen with abuse, because in order to survive when you're living with your abuser, to some extent you might have to see them as a good person, and that might make you defend them even when they are in the wrong, and that might mean that you feel compelled, or you might even be ordered to do things like that for them because it might help preserve you psychologically in some way. And it's just, if anything is happening to Lindsay, I feel horrible, and I hope that she's able to extract herself from that. If friends offer her help, if Otep reaches out again and is like, hey, if he comes to my house, I'll kick his fucking ass, like, you know, come stay with me, like, you know, I hope that she is safe. I hope that nothing bad is happening, but, you know, I can't deny the evidence that points in the direction that something may be happening there, which is just really, really awful, you know, if he is continuing to do this yet again with another person that he is in an intimate relationship with. And now that we are all up to speed on all of Marilyn Manson's various relationships, I do want to shift gears slightly and talk a bit about other allegations and stories involving Marilyn Manson, because one of the big critiques, concerns that people had with the last video is that, like, oh, well, these are all just like his ex-girlfriends talking, and so they're just jealous, they want money, they want fame, they're scorned women, they're talking out against him because they're upset that he ended their relationships, blah, blah, blah. And you know what, honestly, if it turned out to be a lie, I would be relieved, because that would mean that dozens of women didn't experience horrific, life-changing abuse. And I would be like, great, I'm happy this is all fake, because that means that people have not experienced life-altering trauma. So I'm okay with that. But unfortunately, it is not just the story of scorned girlfriends. If you don't believe girlfriends because they might be biased, there are many other people throughout the years that have talked about Marilyn Manson that maybe you would believe. Like, let's say other fellow rockers and people that have worked with him over the years. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the people that have been professionally associated with Manson over the last couple decades of his career and their opinion about him as a person and the nature of his relationships. Now, one of the most recent statements comes from Wes Borland, who is best known as the guitarist for Limp Bizkit. Prior to going back with Limp Bizkit, he was with Marilyn Manson's band from about 2008 to 2009, and he had the following to say when he was on a podcast around the time the allegations first came out in February. Marilyn Manson, I was in that band for 9 months. He's not a great guy. Every single thing that people have said about him is fucking true. So relax about the allegations towards the women. Like, when people say that these women are coming after him right now, just fuck off. They are speaking the truth. I was there when he was with Evan Rachel Wood. I was at his house. It's not fucking cool. That's all I'm gonna say about it. He tried to choke me out on stage, and I flipped him over and knocked the breath out of him. He's not a great guy. Good fucking bye. And yeah, the choking comment, that's not the first time that Marilyn Manson has choked out somebody he's been working with on stage. The most famous example of this is when he choked out a 19-year-old Taylor Momsen on stage. And I've seen very conflicting reports about this. Some people have said that, like, you know, she was really into it and it was super, super hot. And, like, at the time, people said things that are just like, oh my God, just horrifying. They were like, Taylor Momsen gets slutty on stage with Marilyn Manson. Just like, excuse me while I vomit at that statement. Thank you very much, music press. Now, on the other side, you did have people indicate that she was actually really horrified when this happened. They had not planned it. They had not talked about it. She literally had like a panic attack as soon as they got off stage after the performance.
Going back and forth between watching at side stage, and then they had a TV projection in the backstage area. She came off stage and I was like, okay, we gotta go to the interview. She came off stage extremely frantic, and there was like, she was a mess. Well, she wasn't a mess, but she was like frantic. She didn't know what was going on, and she just kept saying like crazy things. And then she also had blood like running from her mouth. She was bleeding out of her mouth. So the things that she was saying when she came off stage was things like, we didn't plan that in rehearsal. We did not do that in dress rehearsal. What he's crazy. We did not go over that. And she was like, he choked me. And yeah, so she was pretty distraught. I quickly got her some water, and obviously the big interview of the night was not going to happen. So it took a while for her to calm down and just process what had just happened, and she ended up getting choked on stage by Marilyn Manson, and they obviously did not discuss that like during dress rehearsal.
And she did make statements at the time pretty soon after this happened where she was like, fuck yeah, I got choked up by Marilyn Manson. But if you're like a young musical artist and the person that you would be making allegations against is like a really famous rocker, it probably wouldn't endear you to the music scene to be like, actually it was really uncool that he choked me on stage, especially around the time that it happened. So we don't really know exactly the nature of the choking, but at minimum, whether or not she ended up actually being into it or not, he, without thinking about it, without planning, establishing consent, negotiating anything, choked a 19-year-old on stage because he thought it would be fun, and he didn't really think twice about it. Like, even if she'd like it, like, playing with fire there, buddy. Maybe let's not non-consensually choke people and hope they're secretly into it. That kind of seems like a bad plan, doesn't it? I hope so. Let's not do that. And going further back in his musical career, like Westmoreland, Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails, a band I fucking love, by the way, just to fully get my bias out there, has not had very good things to say about Marilyn Manson for a pretty long time now. The two do have a pretty extensive shared history. Marilyn Manson was signed with his record label, Nothing Records, and they worked together to release the first 5 of Marilyn Manson's albums prior to having a fallout during the release of Antichrist Superstar. There were some indications that they may have made up, but by the time of 2008, they were once again no longer on good terms. With Reznor asserting at the time that, quote, he is a malicious guy and will step on anybody's face to succeed and cross any line of decency. Seeing him now, drugs and alcohol now rule his life, and he's become a dopey clown. More recently, he stated this: I have been vocal over the years about my dislike of Manson as a person and cut ties with him nearly 25 years ago. As I said at the time, the passage from Manson's memoir is a complete fabrication. I was infuriated and offended back when it came out, and I remain so today. The end of that statement is referring to a story that was in Marilyn Manson's book, The Long Hard Road Out of Hell, where he talked about him and Trent Reznor together, like, sexually assaulting a drunk woman, and Trent Reznor has always denied that, and it is very likely that that could be a made-up story or at least an extension of the truth. And while Trent has never spoken directly about any of the allegations made against Marilyn Manson by the women involved, at least it certainly seems that Trent doesn't believe Marilyn Manson to be a good person. And I think that certainly says a lot, because it would have been beneficial, I think, for Trent Reznor to maintain a professional relationship with somebody that I think a lot of people like associate Nine Inch Nails and Marilyn Manson as kind of this like very edgy alternative like 90s stuff. And so I think, you know, if they could have maintained a professional relationship, could have, you know, gotten over it and been friends, it would have been good for both of them. So I think it says a lot that he has taken the time to step back from Marilyn Manson and decide to not work with him professionally, when I think that is, you know, I don't think he, you know, he's not in trouble because he didn't work with Marilyn Manson, but I think there could have been a lot like financially beneficial to continuing that relationship. And just because this might still not be enough evidence for some people, I do want to point out that he has also assaulted his own band members. I don't have the name in my notes, so I want to say it's like Johnny 5? I'll put it on screen if I get it wrong. I think it's Johnny 5. But in 2003, he kicked his bandmate in the head during a concert shortly before firing him later in 2004. So, you know, sounds like a real good guy all around there, right? And just to put a little bit of an end cap on this section, Ellie Roswell of the band The Wolf Alice said that when she met Manson after a performance at a festival, he was very complimentary towards her in a way that seemed disingenuous. And then by the time that she caught on to what he was doing, he had been filming up her skirt with a GoPro. This guy, he just... everything. He's like I want to violate everyone in all ways possible. Anyways, quite a number of stories there from other people in the world of music. You know, if you're one of those people that thought, oh, you know, this is just a story of scorned women, hopefully that illustrates to you that this is not just about scorned women. Many, many people that work with him professionally, not just personal relationships, have negative experiences and negative opinions of him. Of course, I do think the intimate partner violence is the most severe, but it certainly seems like he's not very respectful to many people that are in his life. And one of the other big things that came up in the video is, of course, like I said, what happened is people were crying cancel culture and that he's being treated like he's guilty until proven innocent, and, you know, he needs to have his day in court. And by the way, I do agree. He should have his day in court, as many days in court as need to happen. However, what if I told you he's actually been taken to court numerous times for somewhat similar things? Oh yeah, because that happened. It absolutely did, multiple times. The most famous one is in 2001 at a concert. He assaulted one of his security guards in Detroit. Quote, he wrapped his legs around the guard's neck and rubbed his member against his head while wearing only a leather thong and pantyhose. The guard sued Manson for sexual assault and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The civil suit was later settled out of court, and he was ordered to pay $4,000 in fines for the criminal proceedings. And this was not the first time that he did something to somebody that was working at one of his concerts. In a civil battery suit, David Diaz of Minneapolis sued for $75,000 in Minneapolis federal court in the year 2000. After 2 days of deliberation, the jury decided that Manson's alleged molestation of David had been part of the show and that he had not overstepped his boundaries as an artist, with them ruling in favor of Manson against Diaz. And I do think it is telling that it took a jury 2 days to get a verdict on that case, because I could see how, like, in the course of an edgy performance, something sort of, like, crass happens, and it could possibly be interpreted as consensual, like, especially, again, like, the late 90s, early 2000s, like, we did not have a robust notion of consent. I think if this kind of thing was retried today, we may have seen a different result come out from that case, because I certainly don't think that you get to assault people on your staff as part of an artistic performance. That doesn't seem like it should be a good thing that we should promote. But, you know, we don't know how that jury went, and, you know, I can see why it might have been a complicated decision. One last thing that I should note here is just trigger warning for Nazi shit here, because I thought I was done in the last video after all of this other Nazi shit. Like, what could he possibly possibly have done that could be any different from anything else that he said? Turns out, after the video came out, I was browsing the Marilyn Manson fan subreddit, and on the front page of that was somebody's most prized possession from Marilyn Manson. And I kid you not, I will put a picture of it on screen now. It is a pair of panties that this guy got from a concert that he had signed by Marilyn Manson, and Marilyn Manson signed it with a swastika. A swastika. And not only this, there is a photo alongside the signed panties of Marilyn Manson doing the signing and drawing the swastika. You cannot make this shit up. Somebody was proud to own this. Oh my God. What is the weirdest part of this story? Because for me, the Marilyn Manson Nazi panties are probably at the top of that list. That was the thing that somebody in the Marilyn Manson fandom was proud of owning enough to get it to the front page of a subreddit about Marilyn Manson. And of course, we can't forget, I didn't bring this up originally, he literally has a song that's called As Pretty as a Swastika that was on his High End of Low album. Do you know who he was dating at the time when that album came out and when he would have been writing music for it? That's right, he was with Evan Rachel Wood. Ding, 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 ding. Yeah, there's definitely... I find it hard to comment about the Nazi shit because I don't know what to do other than just be like, why are you so irresponsible with just even if it's just edginess? Why are you edgy about anti-Semitism? Dude, why? Stop it. Just stop it. Get some help.
Stop it. Get some help.
Alright, so to wrap up this video, the last thing that I wanted to do is just show you guys more of Marilyn Manson's own words. Can we say anything about Marilyn Manson's behavior just because of the things that he says about himself? I mean, in his book, The Long Hard Road Out of Hell, which is really what I wanted to use for a source, he literally talks about plotting to kill his ex-girlfriend Nancy, and then instead of doing that, he has his current girlfriend beat the shit out of her, which, that's not a good thing to do, Mr. Manson. Don't do that, please. However, I didn't want to rely too much on The Long Hard Road Out of Hell as a source for a couple of reasons. One is, I knew this when I made the first video, but I didn't mention it explicitly. That book is co-written / ghostwritten by a journalist that loves Marilyn Manson named Neil Strauss. And it could be that if he's willing to say this while wanting to paint Marilyn Manson in the best light, that really says a lot. But, he probably wants to embellish it a little bit because, Marilyn Manson, edgy 90s rocker, right? So, not the most unbiased source for any type of biography there for Manson. Also, two, Marilyn Manson is a fucking liar.
Science is a liar sometimes.
Oh boy. Marilyn Manson just lies and lies and lies, and he can't stop the lies, okay? He lies about being monogamous. He lies about using drugs or not. He lies about if he's a shy, timid person. This is I don't know. He lies about backstage antics. He lies about the things that he does with bandmates or not. You can't take anything he says as true or false or not because he just says so many lies about everything. And even if he's not lying directly about himself, he's super, super happy to maintain whatever rumors suit him, right? So he removed a rib to be able to suck his own dick. Who knows if that's true or not, right? There are certain ones he's definitely disputed over the years, but for the most part, he's super happy to kind of just let whatever is floating out there about him float out there about him because, again, edgy rocker, and just the sheer preponderance of lies is just, it's so, it makes everything so hard to sort through because then you get into this weird situation where you have people that simultaneously believe that Marilyn Manson couldn't be an abuser because he's too nice of a person, that it's obvious that all of this is just a stage persona, and of course he's gonna embellish stuff because he's a rocker. And so, like, really, from interviews he said that he's like too shy to, like, he's too nervous to, like, shower with women. He's really this, like, sensitive, misunderstood artist type, like, oh my gosh, look at this, like, dork playing violin in the woods with no makeup on, so wholesome, so cute. And then you have people that are like, you should have fucking known that you were gonna be abused by Manson, because look at all of these things that he said in his songs and the things he's done in these music videos, his public statements, his performances. Like, it was obvious, right? Here's the thing. Manson wants you to believe both of these things about himself. He wants you to believe that both of these things are true. That he is a sensitive, nice, soft boy that's really like a romantic at heart, and that he is this edgy, dangerous motherfucker. And he wants both of those things to be true, and he will tell you whatever is most convenient for him at the time. If you want to be his fan, if you want to be able to blame women for not being able to withstand his love bombing and lies, like, whatever is out there, if you want to pick something up, you will pick it up for believing whatever narrative it is that you want to have. Is he a sheep in wolf's clothing, or is he a wolf in wolf's clothing pretending to be a sheep? And just remember, at the end of all of this, you don't need to believe Marilyn Manson's words to come to a conclusion. You just need to look at his actions, and hopefully that'll be enough to point you in the right direction. And that's everything that I really wanted to share here today. I know, again, still so much I couldn't talk about, so many other people's stories, like Scarlett Capella and Chloe Black, people I talked about in the previous video, and their stories are worth hearing about. Again, I will link to as many of them as I can down in the description box, along with my sources, anything else I think is relevant for this story that you might want to hear about. I do have a limit on the number of links that I can put in a description box, so I will just do as many as I can. And I think that's everything that I have to share for now. Any additional comments, questions, stories, opinions, whatever else, put it down in the comment section below. If you guys want me to, I could do a part 3 for this video. This is like really intense work, so I don't want to have this be a thing like every week, but it is an important story to share, and I do want to get as much information out there as possible. Again, I hope healing for everyone. I hope that Brian Warner has his day in court. I hope that if Lindsay is in an abuse situation, she heals from that, she gets out of it. I hope that she's fine. I hope abuse isn't happening. I hope all of the women that have made allegations find hope in healing and get to move forward in their lives from this story, and that it doesn't end up defining them. And if you enjoyed this, if you got something out of it, if you haven't already, please do subscribe. I make videos twice a week about all sorts of kink and BDSM related topics. And finally, if you want to support what I do, if you want to help me make more videos just like this one, you can check out my Patreon. A link to that will be down in the description box below. That's what makes this video, as well as all the other videos on my channel, possible. If you already support me over there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you guys next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Well, you don't seem particularly scary at all, if I may say so. Is that disappointing?
Well, I think the scariest thing about me is that there are different sides to what I do. I'm sure if there were a devil and you were to meet him, he'd be quite charming, I'm sure. I don't think he would, set you on fire right there on the spot.